From the CO2 tank, we attach a regulator. So the ones in the ones that are red here are called primary regulators because they attach directly to the CO2 tank. Below that, we are what's called secondary regulators. They look almost identical, but you'll notice that these ones have barbs on the end of it, and they don't attach to a CO2 tank or a nitrogen tank. So you can connect a primary regulator. So this one would connect to the CO2 tank, and then this one you could run the gas out of here at a higher rate, and then once you get down to your secondary regulator, you can connect the two with a tubing, and then you can dial in your keg from here. And you can connect these into a series like this. That you can either have one or you can have it four. The backs of the primary regulators will have, let me go here. Let me go to my overhead can. So one of the things that you'll notice is on the back of some regulators, there'll either be a PRV valve like this, or sometimes you'll see it, depending on the manufacturer, it will kind of come out the corner here as another valve that you can pull that will also relieve some pressure. But this is a safety valve that will pop. Typically what we've seen is about 52, 53 PSI is if you go too high on the gauges here, what will end up happening is this will just open and then all your gas will just start escaping the back. So one of the things, if you ever turn your regulator on and you just got a bunch of gas coming out the back of it, it's your pressure relief valve that went off, and just lowering the pressure will turn that back off. On these Taprite regulators that we sell, the main knob here, there's different, I only brought one, but there are different ways. This is a nitrogen regulator, but the top's either going to have a screw to adjust the pressure, or it's going to have a giant knob, or there's a hybrid between these two, which has a knob that you don't need a screwdriver for, but it just has like a T handle on it that you can move and adjust the pressure. So, but we like the big Taprite ones because you don't need a tool to adjust the pressure. But one of the downsides here is these come locked. What a lot of people don't realize is that when you have to pull it out in order to move the dial, move the gauge. So these primary regulators come with two gauges. One of them is a fill gauge. It will show you basically that it's full, and it will stay full basically up until it's almost empty, and then it will show empty. One of the ways that we like to tell people is, if you really want to know how much CO2 is in your tank, you need to weigh it, right? There's a tare weight that's usually on the CO2 tank, and then once you fill it, they're 5 pound. If they're a 5 or 10 pound tank, subtract the tare weight from whatever it weighs, and that gives you the amount of CO2 that you have. The other one is the pressure gauge. 0 to 60 is all you need. You really won't go above 60 because, again, these will pop at like 52, 55, somewhere in there. And then same with like the beer couplers. Those have a pressure relief valve on them as well. And if those get too high, that pressure relief valve will pop. You can buy these with higher regulator, higher PSI. So I think they go up to like 120 or 150. The problem with that is it's really hard to dial in how much PSI you need with a gauge that's higher. So we like the smaller ones. Also, when you're connecting it to the CO2 tank, there always has to be some sort. You never want metal on metal, right? So you always want some sort of washer between them. The Taprite regulators that we sell have a built-in one. These will go bad. If they ever do, they also make nylon washers that can replace these as well. And if this ever does come out, it's kind of hard to tell, but this actually can unscrew with an Allen wrench. And then at the very bottom here, it's got a cutoff check valve on it. So in case you just want to shut the gas off from here rather than at the tank or turning the gas all the way down. So that's a primary regulator. Let's go to a nitrogen regulator. So what you'll notice is that they are different connections, right? This is a CGA 320 connection. I don't know the technical name for this one off the top of my head, but you know that one is male, one's female. Nitrogen runs at a lot higher pressure, so they're just different. This also has a built-in washer on it, but otherwise they function relatively the same, right? We've got a check valve, we've got a fill gauge, we've got a PSI gauge, and then again on the back of it, we've got a PRV valve. So This would be a secondary regulator. Let's see if I can get it in the center of the screen. This would be a secondary regulator. And what you can do is attach one to the other like that. Run this at a little bit higher than you normally would. And then you can dial in. These would feed the kegs this way. The back of our tap right regulators also have a threaded hole in it. So you can either attach a bracket, or what we like on the primary regulators is they have a cage that you can put on these that goes over it. Because if once these goes onto a 5-pound tank, they can get kind of tippy, and the gauges have a tendency to break or bend. So we like having these covered with gauges, or excuse me, covered with a cage. All right. Apologies, 1 second here. We were at regulators. All right, so once we leave the the mini regulators. So relatively new on the market are some mini regulators that you can either, let me go back to the overhead view here. Are mini regulators that you can attach larger CO2 tanks to. Whenever you buy a nitrogen or CO2 tank, they're never going to come full. They, by law, like you can't ship CO2. So this is the largest CO2 tank that you can ship by law that's got CO2 in it. So these are 74-gram CO2 tanks that will feed mini regulators. They attach through a threaded neck on them right to the bottom, and they act very similar. So if you're just dispensing one keg, these are a good way to go. They also come in nitrogen. These will last, like if you're, like we have these little 2-gallon kegs that we can dispense with these, especially if you're making like batched cocktails. You can get 3 or 4 kegs out of one CO2 tank. But again, with the nitrogen, because it's such a higher, you need such a higher pressure for them, you can't get as much nitrogen into these little tanks. So you get about 1 keg with these, and they're a little bit more expensive. So we like using CO2.